He stood on that stage, lights in his face, crowd applauding, cameras flashing, and every word coming out of his mouth was mine. Word for word. He didn't even change the phrasing. I remember watching from the back row, not even invited to the main event. My name wasn't on the program, my badge didn't scan at the speaker's lounge. I had to fight my way in just to hear my idea presented as if it were his masterpiece, as if I'd never existed. My name is Daniel Ruiz. I'm 36. I used to be the senior strategist at a mid-sized tech consultancy in Austin, Texas. Used to be. I had always been the kind of guy who stayed late without being asked, who printed copies of the deck in case someone's tablet died, who triple-checked client data because I knew the cost of a decimal in the wrong place. Not flashy, not political, just useful. And that was my blind spot. I thought being useful would be enough. That idea he presented, the behavioral mapping forecast system, that was my baby. I built it over months of quiet research, pulling insights from behavioral econ, tech adoption curves, and some custom AI models I'd trained myself on the weekends. It wasn't just another pitch. It was the pitch, the one that could change, how Fortune 500s predicted consumer shifts, the one we knew the investors were waiting for. I had presented it to him, my boss Ruben, 3 weeks earlier. Just us in his office, late evening. He nodded slowly through the slides, asked the occasional question, and then leaned back in his chair with a look I now understand too well. The look of a man calculating how many signatures it would take to cut someone out of the story. And now here he was, on stage, taking the glory, selling my work like a showman selling snake oil. Only, this snake oil actually worked. I didn't clap. I didn't blink. I just watched. You know that moment when you realize the betrayal isn't a misunderstanding or a bad call or something you can fix. It's a knife. Clean. Quiet. And sharp enough to leave you bleeding before you even realize you've been cut. I left that auditorium with my fists clenched, my jaw tight, and my name erased. But I didn't scream. I didn't storm in and demand recognition. I just went home. Sat with it. Because the best kind of revenge isn't loud. It's strategic. And mine? Mine would go viral. I didn't fall into strategy work by accident. It started back in college, where I majored in cognitive science with a minor in business analytics. Not exactly a rock star combo. But I was fascinated by why people make decisions, why they click one button and ignore another, why they buy something they don't need just because it's packaged right. After graduation, I bounced between startups and agencies, always in roles that felt slightly too junior for what I was doing. I didn't mind. I liked being behind the scenes, sketching out patterns, simplifying chaos. I didn't need the spotlight, just the satisfaction of seeing the numbers move because of something I mapped. By the time I landed at Ember & Finch, the firm Ruben co-founded, I'd already earned a reputation in small circles as the guy who can make sense of mess. Ruben liked that, at first. He wasn't a bad guy in the beginning. Or maybe, I just didn't know where to look. He was charming, always polished, always ready with a compliment when the room needed one. But now that I think back, his praise often felt like a placeholder. Something he'd say while filing you away in his head, like a pawn that might come in handy later. I spent the first year building trust with our clients, writing proposals, joining back-to-back pitches, cleaning up flawed models on red-eye flights. I did it all quietly. I wasn't gunning for the C-suite. I just wanted to build something real. Then came the Fortune Vector contract, the big fish. If we landed, then our firm would go from mid-tier to industry leader. Everyone knew it. So when I began noticing behavioral inconsistencies in their consumer trend data, I saw a thread worth pulling. I didn't tell anyone right away. I wanted it to be airtight before I presented it. For weeks, I worked on it alone. Nights, weekends, I reverse-engineered prior campaigns, matched them with regional buying patterns and layered AI-generated predictive clusters on top. What came out was a beautiful, sharp model, one that could predict behavioral shifts 6 to 8 weeks in advance, with 83% accuracy. That's unheard of in our field. Most people settle for educated guesses. I had a system. I titled it Behavioral Mapping Forecasting, just as a placeholder. It wasn't sleek yet. I still had slides to polish, data to simplify, but it worked. Ruben was the first person I showed it to. We met in his office late Thursday, blinds drawn, that usual faint smell of cedar and bourbon in the air. He skimmed through it while swirling a glass in his hand, and when he looked up, his expression was unreadable. He said, "This could be big." That was it. Just 5 words. Then he closed the file, said he'd follow up, and walked out like he had a dinner to get to. I followed up twice over email. No reply. Then 3 days later, I was pulled from the Vector team for capacity balancing and assigned to 2 internal audits. No client-facing work, no access to my own deck. Still, I didn't raise a fuss. I thought maybe it was a mistake. Maybe I'd be back in the room once things settled. But they never settled. Ruben had taken the idea and moved it into a separate pipeline, one I wasn't allowed near. I didn't know how far he'd gone until I saw that conference announcement. I used to think loyalty meant showing up no matter how you're treated. I used to think good work would always be seen. But in that company, loyalty was just a resource, something to extract until it ran dry. And I had given him everything. The push didn't happen all at once. It was a quiet process, the kind that unfolds like fog, hard to notice at first, until you're completely surrounded and can't remember when you stopped being able to see clearly. After Ruben presented my idea at that industry summit, things at Ember & Finch got strange. I wasn't fired. I wasn't even reprimanded. I was just displaced. Meetings I used to lead were reassigned to balance workloads. The strategy, sinks I ran every Monday morning, suddenly moved to Thursdays, and no one told me. I'd show up to a conference room and find it empty, only to see the meeting had already happened, without me. When I brought it up to HR, they gave me that plastic smile and said, "We're just streamlining a few things to help cross-functional efficiency." I asked if that meant I was under review. They said no, just structural changes. But I knew. They'd changed my system login permissions too. Files I built were now locked behind admin clearance. Reports I used to generate were being forwarded to me from someone else's account, with my name stripped from the metadata. And the worst part? Everyone around me pretended like it was normal, like I was the one imagining things. My closest colleagues started avoiding me in the kitchen. Slack threads I was active in stopped tagging me. The casual, "You coming out for drinks tonight?" messages disappeared. That's when the rumors started. Someone told a junior analyst I was being transitioned out for poor performance, that I'd missed deliverables on client work. I hadn't, not once. Every deadline was met, every handoff was logged. But the narrative had already started shifting, and in corporate culture, perception trumps truth every time. At first, I tried to salvage things. I kept my head down, documented everything, even sent polite recaps after every meeting to make sure my contributions were traceable. I thought maybe, just maybe, I could reverse the damage. Then one afternoon, I stayed late to work on internal ops data. I wasn't supposed to have access anymore, but an old cache had remained active on my tablet. I clicked through instinctively and found something I wasn't meant to see. A timeline, buried in the internal project database labeled Q3 Transition Planning. It detailed upcoming staffing adjustments for the strategy division. My name was listed under Exit Pathway, scheduled 3 weeks out. Next to it, IP acquisition complete, Phase 2 to commence. IP acquisition. That meant they didn't just steal the idea, they documented it as theirs. Institutional property. That explained the silence, the isolation. I wasn't just being pushed out. I'd already been erased. I remember just sitting there, not angry, not hurt, just still. My own signature was listed on a slide approval form that I didn't remember signing. They must have doctored it. Or maybe they used a digital rubber stamp tool. Either way, it meant one thing. They'd covered their tracks, and they thought I wouldn't notice, or more likely, they thought I didn't matter anymore. That night I walked home in the rain without an umbrella, past the office towers I used to dream about working in. I felt like a ghost. Not fired, not promoted, just fading. I stood outside a coffee shop window and looked at my reflection. Tired eyes, soaked blazer, a man who gave everything to a place that saw him as disposable. And that's when something shifted in me. I stopped trying to fix it. They thought I wouldn't fight because I was quiet, because I didn't play the politics, because I didn't shout. But they forgot the one thing that made my idea work in the first place. I see patterns. I read behavior. I build systems. And now, I was going to build a new one. The formal meeting came 2 weeks later on a Tuesday morning, 9 a.m. sharp. I knew it was coming. HR had booked a room instead of doing it over Zoom. The invite said Strategic Realignment Conversation, the kind of title that's meant to sound collaborative but always ends with a badge drop. I wore a tie that day, not because I wanted to impress them, but because I wanted to look them in the eye without looking like I'd already given up. Ruben wasn't even in the room. It was just Carla from HR and some junior partner I barely knew. Thomas, I think. They didn't bother with small talk. Carla opened a folder, recited a script about changing operational priorities and emerging market realignments, and then handed me a packet. There was a severance offer, modest, just enough to discourage a lawsuit. In exchange, I was to sign a release confirming that all proprietary work I'd done belonged solely to Ember and Finch, and that I would not speak publicly about the company's internal processes for a period of 18 months. I flipped through the pages, not saying much. At the end of the packet was a checklist. One item stuck out. Intellectual contributions to BMF system, acknowledged and archived. Archived. Not attributed, not credited, just buried. I didn't argue. I didn't raise my voice. I just looked up and said, "Am I being replaced?" Carla blinked, and Thomas shifted uncomfortably. Then he said it. "We've already restructured the department. The client pipeline will be managed by a new vertical." That meant yes, they didn't even deny it. They didn't care, because they believed it was over, that I would take the payout, walk away, and vanish. I signed the termination papers, not because I accepted their story, but because I didn't want a courtroom. I wanted an audience. After the meeting, I packed up what little I had. One notebook, a few Post-its, a small bonsai tree I kept on my desk, already a little brown at the edges. No one said goodbye. I passed a group of interns in the hallway laughing about some meme. They didn't even know who I was. 2 months earlier, I had built the architecture that won the biggest pitch of the year, and now I was invisible. On my way out, I stopped at the glass wall outside the boardroom. Ruben's voice echoed faintly through it, upbeat, rehearsed, talking about vision alignment and agile integration. I waited for him to glance my way. He didn't. That was the last time I saw him in person. Outside, the wind picked up. A gust flipped open my folder, and a page from the severance packet fluttered onto the sidewalk. I bent down to pick it up, and something about it hit me. At the bottom of the page was a line in small print. Non-disparagement clause does not apply to publicly available material not under NDA. It was buried, but it was there. And in that moment I realized something. They didn't copyright my original drafts. They never NDA'd the early prototypes. My work, my real work, still belonged to me. They thought I'd disappear. But they had just handed me the loophole I needed. I didn't act right away. That's the part they'll never understand. I didn't storm the gates. I didn't leak a PDF on Reddit. I didn't burn the place down. No, I gave it time to breathe. Revenge, if it's going to work, has to be quiet, precise, and patient. I moved into a small apartment across town. Nothing fancy, just enough to think, to build. The days were long and quiet. No meetings, no fake smiles, no pretending like everything was okay. Just me, my laptop, and the silence I'd ignored for too long. I started by pulling up the first prototype, the version of the BMF system I had saved on my personal drive. It was old, rough, but it had timestamps, metadata, version history, everything I needed to prove I was the original architect. Opened a new document and began writing. Not an exposé, not yet, just context. I wrote about the idea's origin, the late nights building it, the metrics it predicted that no one else saw. I wrote about how companies miss the point, how they chase shiny dashboards while ignoring the human patterns behind them. I never named Ember and Finch. I didn't have to. The insight spoke for itself. Then I recorded a video. Just a single shot. My desk, my face half in shadow, calm voice, no drama. I walked viewers through the system. I didn't mention betrayal. I didn't rant. I taught. I showed how it worked, why it mattered, why it was more than a tool. It was a framework for understanding people. I uploaded it to a small YouTube channel I'd created years ago for old lectures. I titled it, Forecasting Behavior with Integrity, a Quiet Blueprint. I posted it on a Tuesday morning, no tags, no promotion, just a video, a digital fingerprint of the truth. Then I waited. A week passed. Nothing. Then quietly, views started trickling in. Comments too. One said, "Wait, isn't this what Ember and Finch just announced at the summit? This guy made it first?" Another, "Why is this better than their version? His model actually shows the why behind the what." And then, someone bigger noticed. A mid-tier tech journalist from a data ethics blog reposted the video with the headline, "Did Ember and Finch steal this strategist's breakthrough system?" It spread, slowly then faster. Twitter, LinkedIn, niche tech forums, ethics subreddits. People weren't just watching, they were investigating, cross-referencing dates, pulling screenshots from conference decks, overlaying timestamps. It became a digital breadcrumb trail, and all of it led back to me. The beauty was I never said they stole it. I just showed what I built, before they built their version. And then came the email. A producer from a documentary channel reached out, asking if I'd be open to an interview about intellectual property in the consulting world. I said yes, but only if they kept it focused on the system, not the scandal. They agreed. I sat down with them in a plain room, coffee cup in hand, and told the story like a teacher, not a victim. I wasn't there to expose. I was there to explain. But the exposure came anyway. A week after the episode aired, a junior developer at Ember and Finch anonymously leaked Slack messages between Ruben and the board, bragging about, quietly, phasing out the original architect and securing full rights to the model before he noticed. The messages went viral. The firm's official account locked down. Ruben went silent. I didn't gloat. I didn't post a follow-up. I just watched the collapse from my living room, quiet, still, knowing that truth doesn't need a microphone. It just needs time, and a little clarity. It started with an apology, but not from Ruben. A post went up on Ember and Finch's official LinkedIn. No author listed, just a generic banner and a carefully worded note. We acknowledge recent concerns raised regarding the origin of the behavioral mapping forecast system. We are conducting a full internal review. That was the beginning of the end. The comments poured in. Consultants, clients, ex-employees. Everyone had something to say. One former intern even posted a selfie with me from a team offsite, writing, "Daniel was the smartest guy in the room. We all knew it. Now the world does too." The firm tried to hold the line, releasing vague press statements, scrubbing past decks, delaying their Q4 launch. But it was too late. The internet doesn't forget, and neither do clients. Within days, Fortune Vector publicly announced they were terminating their contract with Ember and Finch due to concerns surrounding professional integrity and intellectual ownership. That was a $30 million loss, their biggest account, gone. Then came the chain reaction. 3 other enterprise clients followed suit. Stockholders demanded a restructuring. Board members jumped ship. I got word through an old colleague that Ruben had been asked to step aside pending investigation. That's corporate speak for, we're firing you but giving you time to resign first. A few days later, someone leaked the firm's quarterly projections, and the numbers were brutal. They had lost over 60% of their projected revenue for the next fiscal year, and worse, their reputation was in tatters. The final nail came from the media. The documentary I filmed was picked up by a larger streaming platform under a new title, Ghost Architect: The Man Behind the Model. It wasn't flashy. It was thoughtful, slow-paced, and honest. It showed the work, the process, the quiet moments behind the innovation. And it hit hard. Journalists began digging. People started reevaluating other innovations Ember and Finch had claimed. Patterns emerged. Other former employees came forward. Some had lost bonuses. Some had signed away their ideas without knowing it. My case became a symbol, not just of corporate theft, but of how easily quiet people get erased. I watched all of this unfold from my kitchen table, morning coffee in hand, scrolling headlines on my phone. I didn't feel joy, not exactly. More like balance. One night I received a message from a Fortune Vector VP. Saw the film. We'd love to work with you directly. Name your terms. I replied with a thank you and asked for a week to consider. I already knew I wouldn't go back to consulting, but it was nice to be asked. As for Ruben, the last I heard, he'd moved out of state. His social media accounts went dark. His TEDx talk was pulled, and an industry watchdog site listed his firm under high-risk vendors. A friend forwarded me a screenshot from a Slack group of digital strategists. Someone had dropped a link to my video with the caption, "Don't steal from quiet people. They build things louder than you speak." It made me smile. Because that was it. I didn't shout. I didn't sue. I didn't burn bridges. I just told the truth. Clearly, calmly, and publicly. And when the dust settled, all that was left, standing, was the work. I never went back to Ember and Finch. Never even walked by the building again. There was no reason to. A few weeks after everything went public, I received a letter in the mail. No return address, just my name written in a handwriting I recognized instantly, Ruben's. Inside was a single sheet of paper. No apology, just 2 lines. You were right, it was yours. I just wanted to be remembered. I folded the paper and tucked it into the back of my notebook, the same one I used when I first drafted the model. I didn't hate him. I just understood him now. That need to be seen, that desperation to matter. It's what makes people lie and steal. But I don't need to be remembered like that. I teach now, small workshops, private sessions. Sometimes I speak to young analysts about ethics, about building something that lasts, not just something that scales. I tell them to keep receipts, to protect their voice, but more than anything, to believe that quiet doesn't mean weak. The bonsai I took from my desk, it sits by my window now. I water it every morning. New green leaves have started to grow, slowly, steadily. I think of that system I built, not just as a piece of tech, but a reminder that ideas can survive theft, that truth finds its way through the noise if you're patient, if you're honest. My revenge didn't need fire. It needed only light.